Gatekeeper, open the portals between the gods and mortals. Power freely flows as our magic grows.
Mars, with your strength and might, with your untiring effort, with your steadfast courage and willingness to defend and protect our intentions against all of our enemies, within and without, with your skillful wielding of the spear and the ability to cut out what does not serve us. We call upon you now. Join us here and remove from this place all destructive influences so that our workings may flourish. We offer you this libation. Mars, accept our offering.
Mars, accept our offering. Hi, I'm Aaron.
And I'm Jonathan.
And you're listening to Part the Mist,
a podcast by a pair of ADF druids here in Portland, Oregon.
All right. Wow, that was a beautiful invocation to Mars. And we invoked Mars today because our episode today is going to be about the Roman Hearth Culture. A little bit of a controversial discussion within druidry at times, but absolutely a really fascinating one, I think, personally.
I will straight up and say that a lot of our religious framework, or a lot of our ritual framework is based on Roman practice, but you did not just hear that from me.
Well, a lot of what we haven't recorded is from the Roman practice. Mm-hmm. Well, is, from the Romans.
Yes. Anyway,
so I'd like to bring something back that we haven't done for a few episodes. How are you doing, Jonathan?
Well, it's going. Personally, I gave my 3 weeks notice last week for my job, in which case they politely terminated my position, saying, thank you for giving us your 3 weeks, but we decided to end your employment. So,
but the upside to that is
I'm doing this podcast with you.
That too. You also have a job lined up.
Yeah, I have a job lined up. Yeah, I'm also having some issues with the unemployment, because apparently if you tell them that you were let go or something, or told them that you were dismissed, they have to do a 5 to 8 week investigation. So it's a little rough. But I have been taken care of by two very generous people who were very nice and sent me some money to help me pay rent. So I'm very, very thankful for them.
Awesome. So yeah, sending out thank yous to those people over the airwaves.
Yes. How are you doing?
I know for myself. So something I don't think I've mentioned on the podcast lately is I actually have become employed. The last couple of months I've been working regular full-time hours. So I've been a little bit busier myself, but of course always making time for the podcast and making time for the Grove.
Yes.
And
speaking of the Grove, we just had our nominations for our next election. Somebody's running for senior druid.
Well, have you told the people of the podcast?
No, not quite yet. Why don't you go ahead? Go ahead.
Okay. Jonathan has been leading Columbia Grove for 3 years now. And has decided that he needs to take some time to step back and work on his clergyship and honestly just take a break from leadership, I think. So I'm running for the senior druid position now, and Jonathan is running for liturgy and PR, basically.
Yeah, the chief liturgist, which is the person who's in charge of all of our liturgy, all of our rituals, and the PR person. So the target's not on my back anymore. Huzzah.
That also means that we just had our bylaws meeting a couple of weeks last weekend, which went really well. And that is one thing that groves have to do is they have to have an annual bylaw meeting, just to make sure basically that we're doing everything by the law and that there's fewer targets on our back, basically.
Well, it's making sure, with the bylaws, it's making sure that you deal with the membership and everything is copacetic.
You have to make sure that everything is running well so that you can qualify for that 501(c)(3).
And our bylaws are 15 pages long, so we have a lot of bylaws. But
It went by really quickly, though. I was really, really proud of us for burning through that in
it's
as little time as we did.
we try to stay as focused as we can and
Yeah.
try to get through that.
Yep.
Before we continue, we should probably talk about who Mars is.
Yes, please do.
Okay, so Mars was viewed as the father of Rome. He was the fatherly figure of Rome. Him and Jupiter. He was the original god of the soldiers. Now, he's very different than Ares, whereas you can see Ares is more of a berserker, more of a warrior. Mars was a soldier, so the warrior, being the person who goes out and fights for themselves or fights for the tribe individually, where Mars was more of the foot soldier following orders. So there are very, very different deities. So when they have different stories, they're just very different. Mars was pretty much everywhere. He did compete with Mithra later on, to the point where Mithra was pretty much banned from worshipping Mithra. Mithra was banned in the legions later on because he was starting to overtake Mars. So there's a whole bunch of stuff going on with Mars, but general gist of it is he's the father of Rome. He is the father of soldiers, of troops.
All right. Well, we're going to be mostly hearing from Jonathan tonight because we're talking about the Roman Hearth Culture, and this is his area of expertise. But I will make sure to butt in and ask questions if I'm getting lost, so that you guys can kind of follow along too, just in case you're having those kind of questions.
I'd first like to state that I am not an expert in Roman mythology. There is so much stuff out there that we could probably create a whole podcast alone on the mythology and just the people and then the events. So I don't know everything.
And I'd like to state too that as with the last two hearth cultures, there will no doubt be more podcasts coming down the road with more interviews and more information about the Roman Hearth Culture. Yeah.
So my goal today is to give the key concepts, principles, and some definitions that were important in regards to the Roman religion, which we'll see I'll talk about in a few minutes that there was no such thing as the Roman religion. Now, I personally tend to rant a little bit, so forgive me on this. I also have, I don't know if it's a sore spot, but I feel like I have to defend my position quite a bit. One thing I'd like to get out of the way is this is not Roman Catholicism. Roman Catholicism was the evolutionary step from the Romans. A lot of things happened in the 3rd century, 4th century, which caused the transition. It wasn't one event, it was a lot of events. I could personally say that the gods got so convoluted that like one god had 20 different syncretized other gods, where people were just, I don't know if people were really even believing it anymore. I mean, that's just my personal opinion. So it really got diluted. It really got away from what the original intentions of the practice was. And there's a whole bunch of other things. The crisis and decline of the Roman Empire is a huge subject. Gibbons wrote a huge work on the decline of the Roman Empire. I'm not going to get into that. I'm really going to be talking mostly about the Republic. So think from about 500 BC to about 200 BC, before it started getting a whole lot of different influences from a whole lot of different people.
So before the Empire even, correct?
Way before the Empire. The Empire, while that's the most people know about the Empire, was actually towards the tail ends, because the Empire really was only around from 11 BC to about 350, maybe 400, just to be safe. Whereas the Republic and pre-Republic was from traditionally 750 BC all the way up to 10 BC. So there's a lot more of the Republic than there was Empire, but we never focus on the Republic. We mostly focus on the Empire.
Well, and the Republic would be the one that has the most influence from Indo-European.
Yes, they are also influenced heavily by the Etruscans, the other Latin tribes, and then later on the Greeks. So the Hellenic influence to the Roman religion came mostly from the 1st century AD with Augustus, so it came later. Now, one thing I'd like to emphasize is the interaction between the Romans and the Latin people, and the Greeks and all those people, they all traded information. It wasn't, the Romans stole everything. It wasn't a one-way street. The Romans also influenced the Greeks, and they influenced, the Romans, and everyone influenced each other. Everyone was trading information with each other. So to speak about religious purity of any hearth culture is really questionable.
Right.
There isn't any religiously pure people.
Correct.
I mean, I know that the Norse were influenced by all different types of people. I mean, they weren't in a bubble. This is that we know the most about the Romans, so we can clearly see when the influences started. There's actually written documentation where you could see the change. So we know exactly when the changes happened. But we're talking about when, and then the Republic, where they still conquered Italy mostly. They conquered southern Gaul and a lot of the Iberian, so Spain. Where I'm going to start, I think, with this is going back to the 18th and 19th century, A.D.
And for our listeners' sake, Jonathan is reading this. He has a tendency to ramble a little bit, in case you guys haven't noticed.
Yes.
From our last 8 episodes.
Yes.
So just to kind of help keep him on track, he's got a script, so it's going to sound a little bit,
It's going to sound a little red because there's so much information. I could just go off on a tangent.
And he would.
I would get so angry and so passionate about this stuff. I love it. It's great. But we're going to start with the 18th and 19th century. So prior to the 18th and 19th century, prior to that, most historians viewed the Greek and Roman religion as one of the same. They would interchange the gods. So you would see like Zeus and Juno, or Athena and Minerva, or, how was another one? Mars and Zeus, because to them they were the same. And this was further pushed along during the 18th and 19th century with the Druid revival in Britain. So you had the Meso-Druids, who were mostly more of a nationalistic, Freemason based at looking at their whole backgrounds, their whole history, and tried to make it relevant to that day with their known research. So what they did was good for their time. We know a lot of it is junk now, but back then it was good.
I believe we did talk about them a little bit in our podcast about Druid.
So at this time, during the 1900s, you had the Industrial Revolution. So prior to this, people were living in, majority of people lived in small villages. There wasn't really big cities. And so the Roman and Greek gods were everywhere. There were paintings everywhere. There were statues of them everywhere, new statues that were written about all over the place. They were the gods of order. And because these people's lives were, near the forest, and the forest and all that stuff was scary, agricultural was scary, you wanted to honor gods that were about order. But then the Industrial Revolution happened in the early 1900s, when people were moving to cities. So now everyone's living in cities. That's all about order. You're now looking to the forest. Now, Ron Hutton, I heard about this whole theory from Ron Hutton on the Obod podcast.
On Druidcast?
Yes, on Druidcast. Thank you. About the idea that once the Industrial Revolution happened, people turned away from the Roman and Greek gods and looked at, even though Pan is a Greek god, he was sort of Britanized. Pan was everywhere. It's an obscure Greek god from a obscure island. The Kronos king came big, Herm, the Wild Hunt, all that became big because people were looking into the forest. They wanted to go back to that. It's kind of like us today. We kind of want to get back to that quasi-agrarian thing.
Yeah.
So the Roman gods and goddesses fell out of favor. They were then considered dull. They were considered boring. They didn't have the mysteriousness and ooh and ah and the poetry as these newly rediscovered Celtic deities had. So they kind of fell to the wayside. And around in 1836, a group of historians decided that they wanted to separate the Roman religion from the Greeks, and they wanted to breathe in new life into the Roman religion. See, like, it wasn't just boring thing. It wasn't this. We can't compare what the Druids did to what the Romans did. They're two very different things. So we need to look at it as its own separate thing that has its own values. They argued that, hey, Christianity came from this. There must be something to it. These people who conquered all these lands and brought these gods with them and syncretized them, like the Gauls, like Tyrannus, Jupiter, and all these things. There must be something to this religion. So they did. They were able to separate it. However, the whole mixing of the Greeks and the Romans being the same never really left us, especially with American textbooks, because they always seem to keep them. You have like 6 chapters of Greek history and like a chapter of Roman history.
I know. I was basically taught that the Romans, quote unquote, stole the Greek gods.
But then to imply that they stole them means that the Greeks didn't have them anymore, which is hilarious itself.
But I know it probably wasn't helped any by the fact that when the Romans tended to talk about gods from other religions, they would kind of compare them to their own gods.
It was a way so that when they wrote about it was a way that the Roman citizen could understand. I mean, when you have all these foreign weird gods, the best. I mean, we do this when we go to somewhere weird. We use analogies.
Yeah.
When we go to strange lands or see things that we've never seen, we use analogies.
Yeah.
But that's not what that thing is. It was just something for us easily to comprehend. So the Romans did that. And of course, that served multiple purposes of conquest and stuff, but we're not getting into that. The Romans like
than we want to get today.
The Romans are kind of like it's kind of like Pokemon. They wanted to collect them all. And the reason is their idea was, and I'll talk about this in a second, is the more gods Rome had, the better. Why should we turn down other gods? If they could help us, if we can make sacrifices to them and they're willing to help us, why not? Why? That's, So we're going to go into some key concepts here. Well, I can go on to that subject for another hour and a half.
Oh my gosh, yeah.
Yeah, being only 15 minutes into this already. We're going to go into some key concepts. So the Roman religion was all about orthopraxis versus orthodoxy, which is really much in line with ADF's core order of beliefs.
Now, what is, just in case we have listeners who don't know, what is orthopraxis? What is orthodoxy?
Orthopraxis is the right practice, the right observation of ritual, and orthodoxy is right belief, prescribed belief. So the Roman religion was ritualistic in nature and was strictly traditionalist. However, this did not prevent it from evolving and integrating new elements for openness. New citizens, new gods, was part of the Roman tradition. Rome was accepting of all people so long as they paid taxes and respected the local cults. What makes Roman religion unique is the fact that accepting new gods into the Roman pantheon was in fact traditionally Roman. So being eclectic was traditionally Roman. Accepting new ritual beliefs, accepting new ritual garb, all that stuff, accepting new ideas was their tradition. I mean, Isis had a huge temple in Rome. And that's obviously Egyptian. So
that sounds similar to ADF practices.
It seems actually, it's very similar to how paganism is today.
Yeah.
We take different gods that we like to work with, and we work with them together. And that was very different than other hearth cultures who only stick with their local tribe deities. And I'm not putting that down or anything. That's just strict difference. Now, being Roman was not so much being a person born in Rome, but was very similar to what the American dream is. The idea that these virtues, these qualities that makes the American, our American dream was the same thing to being Roman. The fact that 99% of quote unquote Romans weren't even Roman, weren't even born on the Italian peninsula. But you would be Roman Britain, Roman Gaulish. It was what you wanted to be. When the Visigoths sacked Rome and disposed the last emperor, they put on a puppet emperor and continued almost the same rule as what Rome did. Because they liked the system. They just didn't like the Romans. But they liked what they did, but they just didn't like them. So the Roman religion and culture had a set of views and beliefs which was crucial to the spread of influence of Rome. So instead of forcing the belief of certain Roman gods, Rome spread the idea of certain method of practice that would be recognized throughout the empire. So you could think of it like ADF's core order of ritual. You go to one grove ritual, one ADF Grove ritual, and you go to another one, you can say that's ADF. So while these different people in in Germany and in Iberia, they might be honoring different gods, but they're still doing the same
similar
practice.
Ritual.
Yes. So they kind of standardize the statewide practice, essentially. Even though the Roman religion was heavy in rituals and ritual attitudes, and thus creating a cold and self-interested reputation, it is a mistake to consider it closed to all spiritual ideas and content. This practice by no means excludes speculation, criticism, etc. So criticizing and having speculation of the Roman cultus was fine. But however, these such activities took place outside of religious life in a strict sense of the term. So the only dogma there was the obligation to observe rituals. Individuals were perfectly at liberty to conceive of the gods, religion, the world, however they please. So they could argue the existence of gods because they separated the going and doing ritual practice from their beliefs. So it's almost like they had like a secular opinions, like they could have their secular opinions, but even the atheists and everything still went to the rituals because it's what you did as a community.
That sounds very much in line of what I know about the philosophers. Or, well, the Greek philosophers anyway. But, I mean, it sounds like that would mesh very well.
And there's a funny side note with this I've learned that the original word idiot was a Greek word, and the Romans took it too. And the original idea of an idiot was somebody who refused to partake in rich community ritual, who was a person on the outskirts. A person who wanted nothing to do with these rituals was considered an idiot. But later it turned on to intelligence. But originally it started as somebody who was like the hermit. Yeah. The person's like, oh, well, that guy's just an idiot. He's not doing what we're doing. But side note, I'm sorry. And obviously that means that the expression of belief was quite separate from the religious practice. So you do it because your father did it, your grandfather did his. I mean, your whole family for eons back did it. It's kind of like you do something so much and you keep doing it because the second you stop doing it, something bad's going to happen. Now, that's just my speculation. You just keep doing it, and the second you don't do it, something bad's going to happen.
It reminds me a little bit of the song from Fiddler on the Roof. Tradition!
Oh, God. So the Roman religion, involved no initiations. There was no teachings. Religious duties were imposed on individuals by birth, by adoption, and awarded citizenship. So religious duties were linked to social status of an individual and not to any particular decisions of a spiritual kind. So essentially what that means is those of different classes, those of different work would honor different gods than those of different. So for instance, merchants would all mostly honor Mercury. So you got the merchant class who would honor Mercury, but they weren't expected to honor other gods. Mercury was their number one guy. However, if a merchant somehow gets adopted by a Praetorian family, let's say of the Venus, of the Julii, he would then have to honor Venus now. But he does not obligated to honor Mercury anymore.
So to deviate a little bit, last time we talked about Hestia, and therefore also we talked a little bit about Vesta, who is actually honored at all Roman rituals. Is that correct? So how does that kind of work?
That's different. That's so I'm gonna deviate a little bit. So you have like an EDF ritual, you have the deity of the occasion, right? Same difference. Okay. So you would honor Janus would be first. You would honor then Jupiter, because Jupiter was everywhere too. Then the deity of the occasion, and then Vesta. Okay. Now it's not always like that. That's just a very bare bones. Okay. So, and sometimes you put in Minerva in there too, depending on what you do. But there's always Janus, there was always Jupiter, and there's always Vesta. Always. Depends. It doesn't matter what it is.
So even though you're a merchant, you're honoring Mercury, your ritual still involves Vesta, Janus.
But you're kind of like what we do. It's like you're not putting the full... Okay. Yeah.
Cool. I understand.
Cool. So the Roman religion was a social religion, like we just mentioned, closely linked to the community and not to the individual. It involved individuals only so far as they were members of a particular community. There was, like I said, no such thing as the Roma religion. So essentially, when we talk about the Roman Hearth Culture, that's a misnomer. There's no such thing as the Roman Hearth Culture. It was a bunch of different Roman religions slapped together.
So putting emphasis, there's no such thing as the Roman religion.
Yes, there's no the.
There's Roman religions.
Yeah, so the Roman Hearth Culture does make sense, even though I just contradicted myself a little bit, but there's no such thing as the Roman religion. There were Roman religions, and there was as many Roman religions as there were social groups, as many as different classes, as many different work jobs.
And locations.
In locations, yes, in the cities would have different deities. In the legions, they all had their own deities. Even though Mars was number one, there was still other gods. In colleges, public servants, artisans, even sub-districts of cities had different deities. I mean, there was a deity for pretty much everything because their lives were not, their religion, their spirituality was not separate from their mundane life. Everything they did had a religious connotation to it. The firefighters had their own god they honored. So it was the idea of that whole reciprocity, that like, hey, you help me out, I help you out sort of a thing. Even though it does sound like a business proposition, it was how some of the ancients viewed their relationships.
It makes sense then that there would be gods like, what's her name? The god
Clonacina?
Yes.
The goddess of the sewer. But actually, that was one of the most important goddesses because you needed that poop to flow. You didn't want her to back up. So you had the goddess. And side note, so the prisoners that I work with at the Cosmic Oaks, it's hard for us to dispose of the offerings afterwards, so it's an additional offering to Clonacina. So it doesn't go to waste. So if you're ever in a situation where you need to get rid of offerings, but you can't put it outside for every reason, if you offer it to Clonacina and just offer it to her to say, oh, Clonacina, I offer you this to you so you may flow smoothly. May you take these offerings with you and offer that. Means no, you don't have to worry about it.
And if you choose to do that, I would recommend making sure that everything is flushable that you're offering.
Well, I would assume so.
Hey, man.
Yeah, that's true.
I've seen people offer swords before, is all I'm saying.
Oh, that's true.
Back on topic.
So also religion was also in the politics as well. This is everything else. So, and obviously, I don't need to state this now, but in my notes is obviously it was a polytheist in nature.
It says that in his notes.
Yeah. Just in case you guys weren't aware of that.
In case you missed that.
Okay. So, it was a civic model of religion. The liberty of the citizen overrides all other considerations, even relations with the gods. That, at least with the idea proclaimed by civic religion, is respected the liberty of the citizen and help him or her establish relationships with the gods that was founded upon reason rather than fear. And that was what civic religion was all about. It was originally about the liberty of its citizens. Above all else, above your honoring your God, if you're hindering my liberty, I trump what you're doing.
Okay.
Now, of course, later on that changes, but the whole concept of this is being a free citizen, be able to do whatever I want because my relationship with the God is that. And, and it goes so far as is my God can't tell me to hate you. My gods can't tell me that you're wrong and I'm right. Because that is in fact going against your liberty of free thought. So this whole notion of my gods tell me to do this and hate you, it's a bunch of crap. At least historically speaking, it's a bunch of crap. That's why this idea of the fighting between like all these hearth cultures and all these people say my gods are this. I mean, this wouldn't have happened at least in Rome with all these different deities. Right. There was no fighting because that doesn't create community.
Right.
And it hinges on the civil liberties of people. I mean, our Constitution is based mostly on Rome. I mean, our government is based on Rome, not so much on the Greeks. We're not a democracy, obviously. All right, so some definitions that are important to understanding the Roman religion. Religio. Okay, this one's a little tough because religio means a few things. The ancient writers appealed to two different etymologies to express what they meant by the term religio. Sometimes they trace the word back to, I'm not good at Latin.
Religere.
Which means to bind, and sometimes to relegate, or to pick up again, or to go back over. Also could mean with a sense of religious scruple. In the first case, their intentions was to underline the links between man and the gods, and in the second, it was an emphasis on the need for strict observation of religious obligations. religion as a communal relationship with the gods, and the religion as a system of obedience stemming from the relationship's work. The two principal aspects covered by the term. So essentially what this means is that there was no dictation of how to form your relationship with deity. There wasn't like, oh, this is how you form your relationship. It's more like, as long as you properly honor them in these sets of rituals, you're good to go. It pretty much set a framework that was established back with the first king of Rome, Nubia, or is that the second king? I keep forgetting the second or first or second king. So Nubia set up the Roman religion and the set of rituals, which were passed down for hundreds of years. So as long as you're following these ritual structures, you're set. You're practicing religio. So essentially, religio turned into religion, obviously. But originally, it just meant the framework of how to honor the gods, not necessarily belief. It was just what the framework you use and your obedience to following those frameworks.
Okay, so religio was just, here's how you honor the gods.
Yeah,
period.
Nothing to do with belief. Of course, that changed later.
Right.
And then we have something called superstitio.
The TLDR version.
Yeah, yes. So then you had superstitio. So the term superstition, as it's traditionally defined, referred to a whole set of religious attitudes in the wider sense. Now, superstitious people thought that the gods were evil, jealous, and tyrannical, and thus distrusted them. Now, this ill-controlled fear of the immortals drove them to all kinds of excess, in particular slavish forms of behavior designed to win the favor of the gods. So if they started acting out because they're freaking out because they didn't trust the gods, so they started doing all these lavish sort of things, and the other Romans were like, what are you doing? You must be a superstitious person. So in contrast, the correct approach to religion involved believing that the gods were good and respected the moral code of your location, so long as they were not greatly offended. So if they weren't, if they were treated well and they weren't offended, your city won't blow up, everything will be copacetic. So when we say that the gods are generally good, it stems from superstitio, the idea that the gods are good, that you're not being a superstitious person where the gods are bad. So if you think the gods are bad, that means you're a superstitious person.
Okay.
Nothing to do with ghosts or anything like that.
Nothing to do with throwing salt over your shoulder.
No. No. The city will continue to function. The gods were not expected to take direct revenge or keep disasters upon weak humans. So they weren't going to destroy cities, nor were they going to prohibit cities, because the gods were good. As long as you follow your obligations of doing ritual, the gods would leave you alone.
So if someone's say, okay, I'm stoning this person because I'm worried that the gods are going to destroy the city if I don't kill this person.
So what that
might be a superstitious person.
Yes, and the thing is how the Roman religion works is humans dictated the behavior of other humans. The morality of humanity was up to the hands of the humans. Because humans were supposed to be good. If they were following the rules and the laws, they would be good to each other, supposedly. So essentially, this idea of these notions of you're a sinful person came much later. Laws were carried out by man. Laws were mostly for men, or men. When I mean by men, I mean women too.
Yeah,
humanity. So the gods weren't interested in if you were doing something naughty in the corner or something like that. They didn't care about that. That's a human thing. But in Christianity, superstition acquired a complementary meaning. The term now designated the religion of a false god. That is to say that the pagan gods, who were regarded as demons. The meaning and concept of religion also changed. This is now known to believe in one true God. So religion went from meaning orthopraxis in nature to becoming orthodoxy. So the religion changed to that. So religion today is very different than what the word religion meant back then. So now we're going to go ahead and talk about. Actually, do you have any questions before I go? I mean, you're just kind of going yes.
No, I've been commenting.
Do you want to add? Would you like to add anything?
So it seems to me like not only does the definition of religion changes, from orthopraxy to orthodoxy, basically. And then the definition of superstition kind of changes. So before, a superstitious person was afraid of the gods, in essence, and now a superstitious person is worshiping a devil.
Worshipping is actually, yes.
In
so
essence.
Superstitious person is now believing in false gods.
Right. So that makes sense how that would come to mean what it means now, which is, if I don't throw salt over my shoulder, I'll be followed by the devil or something. Because you're paying homage to other gods by
you're also viewing that these gods
behaviors.
You're also viewing that these gods are bad, whereas we view
that
the gods are good.
Right.
So I think we'll go ahead and take a quick break here. I got some cool Roman music, which I got permission for us to use. We'll go ahead and play some of that and hear from one of our ads from Kirk Thomas, and we will be right back.
Monstris oracula fauni. Fatidice genitoris. Adit lucosque subalta consulit albunea. Nemorum quae maxima sacro fonte sonat. Sevanque exhalat opaca mefitin.
और कोई है नहीं और तहानु ही जनिहि सुतक अहं कुओ saki. Roem pehe chedenizet. Nater turtekau. Kunt natuur to in zaget. Ufer gezef met onze kensu. Gezef kat ham hatu. Met une karpet. Funche. Romer. Sutsmen pohom nehet. Onkneken, miut met. Onkra, miut met. Kiasni Ibrahim utefizet. Kiasni benti kerdesened mirtet. Ketaken mutu pet horte pro henizet not hurt.
Hello, I'm Ember, and you're listening to Part the Mist, a Druid podcast created and hosted by the members of Columbia ADF.
And we are back. All right, much needed water was partaken in.
So I think we've just got a few definitions left to go over, correct?
Yes, and these will go pretty quickly. We're going to go over what sacer is, profanus is, religios is, and sectrius is. All right, sacer. Well, what does the term sacer mean? It means all that is considered to be property of the gods or that which has been dedicated and consecrated to the gods. The sacred was not a divine quality recognized to be possessed by a being or a thing. The gods were not sacred, and no object could be considered to be divine. The sacred was not a magical force placed in an object, but simply a quote-unquote lawful quality possessed by that object. The true meaning of sacrilege was infringement of divine property. Consecration was the process of making something sacred. So an example of this is actually kind of funny, is how the Romans dealt with certain criminals, certain people who did some not nice things in regards to different cults and stuff. So the old custom would go something like this. So the priests would first consecrate these criminals to the gods. Consecrate meaning the process of making something sacred. So they would make these criminals sacred, making those people divine property, which therefore excluded them from any profane interference. So no protection from the law, no person could touch them, no person could give them food, no person could give them housing, or do anything to said person, since that would be sacrilege, which was the infringement of divine property. So being a divine person was not a good thing, because once you were made sacred, you are set aside to the gods, and then it's up to the gods' will for whatever happens to you. And that's how they would pretty much boot people out. Pretty much like one case would be, back in the ancient days, wealthy families would give out money to the poor. Mm-hmm. And they're like, oh, no, we give you poor people money, you support us in certain events, mm-hmm. right? And if the rich people decided not to give the poor people money, the poor people would get together and tell the priest what happened, and then that wealthy person would be considered sacred.
Oh my, that's rude.
Well, no, it was good.
I mean rude in the, colloquial sense of the term.
Oh. So that's the way you would get people begone, is you make them sacred.
Yeah, wow.
So that's sacer. And then profanus, which is what profane comes from, was the opposite of sacred. It's just anything that's not sacred was profane. as there were any sacred things that were ritually transferred to human beings. The profane was an offshoot of the sacred. So profane items, like this cup, is a profane item.
So, but if you gave food to a sacred person, that would be a profane act.
No, you would be committing sacrilege.
Oh, okay.
Mm-hmm.
So I misunderstood a little bit there.
Yeah. You would be committing sacrilege. That's a sacrilegious fact. You are doing something you're getting involved with a divine object or person. Religious were objects or places marked by death. The Romans viewed that any place struck by lightning immediately became religious because some deity seemed to have dedicated itself to it. Like this spot over here, like, have you seen that meme where the 9 lightnings are like, F these 9 fish in particular. So essentially those 9 spots that lightning hit have become religious. Because apparently the gods like those 9 spots in the ocean. They were also places left to the dia manis, which were the gods of the departed. The term could also be used to describe a temple or pious person, so it has multiple meanings. So religios has, again, multiple meanings. You don't really see this term anymore. It has been superseded by religious.
So would a battlefield be considered to be religios because it's marked by death?
It can be.
Okay.
Some sites were, yes. Actually, that's a good point. I think so. Yes. Certain battlefields in the war against Hannibal were considered sacred sites. So yes. All right. Very good, Aaron.
Further thought. So probably then the memorial to 9/11 would also be considered a modern day religios.
Yes, it would be. 9/11 would be.
Awesome.
So sanctus was applied to anything which was a religious offense to violate. This included boundaries, certain laws, treaties. Objects or persons who were holy were neither sacred nor profane, but their integrity and security were guaranteed and confirmed by a sanction or by an oath. Sanctius was applied to anything inviolable and therefore pure. So essentially priests were sanctius. They weren't profane, but they weren't sacred. They were in between. Again, another word we really don't use a whole lot anymore, but it was important to them.
Or maybe like a virgin who was dedicated to Vesta.
Yes. All right, and then we're getting down to the last 3 terms, and the next one is piety. Now, piety has a wider definition than simply religion or being a person who is devoted to the gods. It also means the correct relationship with your parents, with your friends and fellow citizens or your grove mates, as well as the correct attitude with regards to the gods. Piety function as a form of distributive justice regarding the obligations towards the gods. Yeah, so essentially, if you're not a pious person and you're ignoring your obligations to your gods, they will come back and maybe not give you what you want next year. Or their answer to you might be no. That's still an answer. However, piety implies purity. So to be a pious person, I am therefore a pure person. Now, I don't necessarily know the correlation with that, but apparently that's how they thought.
Okay.
Obviously, that has changed now.
Yes. It's changed quite a bit.
Impiety. So impiety was obviously the opposite of piety, denying the gods the honors and the rank that was rightfully theirs. If simple mistakes happen in ritual. So this was important with Roman rituals. If you made a mistake in ritual, you would A, either do the whole thing again, or B, do this, which was you would make a piacular offering, which you see a lot in ADF rituals. Is that, oops, we made a mistake, and if we did make a mistake, we're going to make this additional offering to you. So if anything we have done here has been incomplete, if anything we have done here has been improper, please accept this final offering and repentance. That's what we say in Colombia.
Yes.
That's our impiety offering. If we have made a mistake or offended, we are covering our ass.
So it's my personal belief. I don't have anything to back this up, but if any of you listeners are Shakespeare fans, at the end of Midsummer Night's Dream, there's the whole monologue from Puck that's basically saying that same thing. Like, look, if anything that happened on this stage offended you, remember it was just a play. But that was also kind of the intent, was because it was a very lewd. It was one of, surprisingly, his most lewd plays. The intent was a reminder that none of this is real. Just move on with your day. Don't get offended.
So, what does this all mean? So, what is the Roman religion? What was the point of all this? What's this? What was the ideas behind this religion or religions? The idea was of religious and personal liberty. These rules that I spoke of guaranteed the liberty and dignity of those who practiced, who honored their local cultus, who honored their gods. So this was a religion based on individual and community liberty. These rules guaranteed that established order rules out any power founded by fear. So the fear was never used. You weren't put the fear of God. If you don't make offerings on specific times to God, then you're not honoring your side of the bargain. Right. Then things can happen. But if you don't believe in Jupiter, that's not necessarily relevant because you're that one person. What is in the whole scheme of things? Your one belief is not going to bring down the system.
Right. As long as you're still making offerings to Jupiter.
As long as you're still doing things because it is the whole tradition it's been happening forever. It's a tradition. Like we all have traditions.
Yeah. Well, as long as that column is still holding up the building, it may not look like it's necessary, but make sure it's there anyway.
So people could honor all the gods and practice whatever cults they choose, providing they respect the public cult, public order, and the liberty of others. So the second you start saying my God is better than yours and my God tells me to do whatever to you, you have a right to stop me because it is infringing on your liberty. So this was a religion of liberty. Liberty of their citizens. Now, let me preface this. This wasn't liberty of everybody in Europe. This was liberty to Roman citizens. This was not necessarily liberty to slaves or captured people in battle. So the Celts didn't get these kind of liberties. Right. However, the fastest way for somebody to become a Roman citizen was either to sell themselves into slavery or be taken as slaves, where after they work for a certain amount of time, they become instant Roman citizens. Right. So they get these liberties. So the idea of why do this? Why bother doing this? I'm asking you, why bother do this? I mean, we have a full system here. It's all about liberty. What does this mean today? When you see all the stuff that's going on, all this anger in the pagan community, all the fighting, all the I can tell you how you have to honor gods this way. If you don't honor gods this way, that's all superstitious. Part of the system, everyone is being superstitious and not infringing on other people's liberties to practice their faith.
Gotcha. Yeah, totally.
Yeah. So, why I practice this is because I think that this is a valuable system that can be used today. I mean, I don't only just honor Roman deities, but I think it is a system that honors them the most respectful way and is consistent. And honestly, for better or the worse, there's not I don't put a whole lot of UPG, unverified personal gnosis in this. I do a little bit. So the one downside, it's not, I mean, you can be super creative by creating whole invocations, but ritual gestures and stuff like that is already written down. So pretty much you have a system that's already there you can just walk into. Versus, if creating your own is not necessarily something you are called to do. So yes, it is a double-edged sword, essentially.
It seems like the big tenet here is, respecting, at least as can be applied to modern religion, is respecting the gods and the practices of others. And that is a phenomenal takeaway for me.
It's all about reciprocity. You are having a reciprocal relationship. It's do et des. Yeah. We give so that they may give. It's where we get our saying from. So yeah, and this is just the basic. There's so much more. I think the next time we talk about this, I'm going to go into religion, different deities, different religious high days, and all those sorts of things, because they have holidays everywhere. For all the 8 high days that we celebrate, there's a corresponding Roman holiday somewhere. The Beltane. Only one side.
There's a ton of Roman holidays.
The one funny thing is Beltane for the Romans was completely opposite than the Beltane, how we celebrate Beltane. Yeah. It's the opposite of what happens if you become too scandalous, and how that's not necessarily good. And that's a whole different story. And I'll talk about that, I think, the next time. So I think that wraps it up with the first segment of the Roman Hearth Culture.
So we went a little bit longer, so I think we're just going to go ahead and wrap up this episode, and we'll play Kirk's interview for you at the end of next month's episode.
And next month we're going to be talking about the Norse.
The Norse Hearth Culture, yeah. So hopefully we'll be able to get some fun guests on for that one.
Yes.
So to go into our event calendar, we have a short one for November. On November 5th is actually going to be the Columbia Grove's Welcoming the Mighty Dead ritual.
Which is a Roman ritual.
I'm sensing kind of a theme here with our podcasts and the rituals that we're doing.
I have no idea.
I wonder if Yule is going to be a Norse ritual. Anyway, that is going to be at 6 p.m., isn't it, this time? Or 6:30?
It's 6:30. It says 6:30.
6:30 at West Hills Unitarian Universalist Fellowship
Woof.
in Tigard. At Woof, yes.
Actually, it is in Southwest Portland.
Southwest Portland. Technically. Okay. November 5th is also the Eugene Witches Ball, which I believe is an all-day event, and we will have information in the show notes. November 6th at 3 p.m. is going to be a Feast with the Ancestors, and that's with the Las Vegas Grove. And again, links down in the show notes. Also on November 6th is River Rose Proto Grove's ritual, and they're another Portland Proto Grove, and that's going to be located in Cathedral Park in Portland, Oregon, at 4 p.m. And finally, on November 19th is going to be the Columbia Grove's Druid Drinks at 2:30 p.m. We're going to be going to a new location this time. We're reserving some balcony space at Hobos. Is that the full name?
It's Hobos.
Okay, all right. And that's really it. We don't have any December events yet, so this is just a reminder. Please go ahead and shoot us your events if you want them announced on the podcast. We will be happy to do that.
Okay. So, obviously you can find us on iTunes and Stitcher. We have a fan page and discussion group on Facebook. So let's go ahead and thank
email us.
Oh, hey.
Email us. We haven't mentioned our email in this podcast yet. That is ptmpod@gmail.com. Our website is ptmpod.libsyn.com. And we actually have our podcasts are up on Podbean now. We should probably claim that.
Yeah, you start getting those emails like, what's going on?
So apparently you can listen to us on Podbean as well. I guess they picked us up.
Cool. So let us go ahead and thank Mars. Mars!
Oh, shit. Sorry, before we thank Mars.
What?
One more thing I remembered. I just wanted to do a real quick shout out. We put out a request a couple months ago for some show ideas, segment ideas. We got a lot of really great feedback, and I'm really excited to start incorporating that stuff into the podcast, probably with the new year. So I just wanted to do a quick shout out to everybody that made suggestions. We haven't forgotten you. We are not ignoring you. We just haven't gone around to incorporating your ideas yet. But thank you very much to everyone who spoke up and let us know what you wanted to hear on the podcast. Now we can thank Mars.
Mars! Thank you so much for allowing us to do this podcast tonight. Speaking about you just riles us up. Speaking about hearth culture that isn't mentioned too much. For that, we thank you.
We thank you.
All right. Well, thank you, everybody. We hope to have another podcast coming out shortly. We will have a discussion of our Welcoming the Mighty Dead, probably coming out mid-November.
Mid-November, yep. Looking forward to it.
All right.
Catch you on the flip side.
There you go.
Wise one,
Brave one,
sure one,
strong one, we bid you you now hail and farewell. Go by the powers that brought you, go by the unweaving spell. As thy bright pentagrams fade, depart ere the circle is gone.
Winged one,
Fierce one,
swift one,
hooked one, as we say